What's up, incredible, loved, and valued people. I am so grateful for your life. I'm so grateful that you're here. I am MMA McDaniel, and you are on the Have You Heard podcast. Friends, this is actually part 2 of a continuation of our last conversation last week. So be sure and go check out last week's conversation, as it will ebb and flow right into this one. Mm-hmm. But we are continuing our incredible talk with my Uncle Josh and my husband Josh. So it's going to be a good time. Friends, grab your headphones and let's get into the word. Yay!
Fun. I guess we don't have to talk about what made us smile today, because it'd be the same thing as last episode. So if you want to know what made us smile today, go listen to the last episode.
There is an update. The lights in the car are now turned off.
The lights are now turned off.
And if you
Battery
don't get
is
that,
safe.
If you don't get that, then you gotta go listen to the last episode.
Yeah,
that's right.
That's awesome.
So we are talking about pornography. I believe we're talking about a lot more like foundational, just I guess not specifically the topic of pornography in our first conversation. We're really talking about the heart of it. But today in our conversation, we're talking about how pornography not only impacts you, but it also impacts your relationships, and specifically marriage. But before we go into the topic of marriage itself, I actually get quite a few DMs, questions regarding dating and pornography. And so, Uncle Josh, I would love to start off our time together to ask you, what advice would you give to the person who has said, typically I have the girlfriend coming to me, it's not typically the guy, the girlfriend coming and saying, hey,
you can come to me on Instagram, but
saying, hey, so my boyfriend has just approached me saying that he's addicted to pornography. What do I do? What does our next step look like? What would you say to her?
Well, so step 1, I would let her know that the fact that he told her that is huge, because that's not something that people just kind of drop easily. That is a very vulnerable statement. So a really cool thing about that is there's at least you are with someone that is desiring to be completely open, honest, transparent, and vulnerable in their relationship with them. And so that's significant. And so I think it would be doing a disservice to him if we skipped over that piece.
Absolutely.
So being able to recognize that. However, with that said, it's important for her to be able to take that into account, because this is something that is a struggle that he's going to continue to battle. And it's not something that's so easily won. I mean, otherwise we wouldn't be sitting here having this conversation today if it was just, one of those things that you can easily get over. Here are these 3 things you do and you're done. And so it is a significant consideration that they're going to have to really look at whenever choosing someone that they want to be with. I will say this, like whenever we look at dating relationships specifically, a lot of times the young lady is like, what do I do with this? What do I do with this information? How do I support him? How do I encourage him? Like, what if he, tells me like he's still struggling with it? Like, do I bring it up? Hey, how are you doing with that? Like, what do I do with this information? And I think that needs to be a conversation between the two of them.
Yeah.
It's important to be able to know what those expectations are. This is true of anything in a dating relationship.
Yeah.
Right.
But particularly when we're talking about, okay, if we're living a life for Christ and we're struggling with sin, it's like, okay, significant other, how are we going to deal with sin? What are we going to do? Like, what's our roles in that? How can we support each other? How can we love each other in that? How can we do that in a way that's not putting so much responsibility on us where we feel like we're failing each other, because those expectations is where a lot of stress and anxiety and worry comes in that relationship, specifically from the young ladies, because they're going to be naturally worried more often than guys are. That's just the way it is, unfortunately for you guys. However, it's important to be able to see that, and being able to see that you can prepare for it and have that conversation about what those expectations should be.
Yeah. And I think that's good, because in our last episode, we talk about like having accountability. In our last episode, we talk about, all right, let's go to the heart with this. And so if a guy kind of brings this up and you're in a dating relationship, first of all, you're not married. So if this is something that like, okay, you guys need to step away, that's okay. That's fine. Like that is actually a healthy thing to do. But I think a girlfriend should not be the accountability partner for the boyfriend. Like, if you're struggling, and boyfriend to girlfriend, same thing. If a girlfriend's struggling with pornography, the boyfriend should not be your accountability partner. It's not helpful. It's not their position. Someone wiser, more mature, I highly suggest going to the church, getting people there, finding a counselor, getting people to walk alongside you in that way. That is what their role is. That's one, is they're not your accountability partner. And at the same time, is what we talked about, like, pornography, whenever we get to it and we're wanting to get over it, we're actually wanting to change our heart. We have that mentality that, hey, I'm wanting to stop this. I want to change my heart. And I'm in the process journey, because that is a long journey. It's a hard journey, but it's the word itself. It's a journey. It's not a one-day fix. So you can walk along that journey as they are walking, because pornography, as much as a sin as lying, as alcohol, or not, alcohol's not a sin, but like being addicted to alcohol and all this different stuff, and walking alongside them in that. But if they don't have that mentality, I think that's a heart issue that they need to go and figure out with the Lord.
Well, so to kind of speak into that real quick, it's important for us to distinguish that not only in dating relationships, but in marriages as well. The spouse or the partner should not be the one that is, I call it, policing, or the accountability partner. That needs to be someone else. It needs to be someone else. It needs to be someone else. It needs to be someone else. Like, if you don't get anything else from this, like, please get that. And the reason why that is it puts you in a position where you're always asking that question. And so here's the only two scenarios that can come from that. Either nothing has happened and it's already just put yourself in a one-up position above your partner, which is difficult, especially, let's say you're struggling with something. Like that one-up position immediately makes it awkward. And so it's really challenging. The other thing is like, being able to, whenever you do that, you remove the ability for your partner to be able to come alongside you, to love you, to support you, for you guys to grow in your relationship in other ways. And so it's significant. The biggest pushback I get from people on this is like, yeah, but what about transparency? I'm not saying not to be transparent. And so let's not get that confused. You be transparent, but that active accountability, the active question asking, the active, hey, how you doing? Hey, what are you doing? The person that is on your covenant eyes that gets your screenshots every day does not need to be that person. Because, like, you think about it this way. It's like, and covenant eyes will take 10, 13, 15 pictures any given day of screenshots, and a lot of that's, ads or whatever. If your partner is sitting there going through that and looking and making sure, okay, there's nothing there. What is that? And what does that do to the mindset of that person whenever it's like, hey, you want some coffee? It's like, hold on a second. I'm going through the 14th screenshot and making sure you didn't screw it up. It's like it immediately puts it in a place that could definitely be experienced in a negative connotation. And so that's important. Here's the other thing that I want to make sure to stress. And this is what I have found, especially girls in dating relationships. They struggle with kind of their own body image already. And so they automatically will see them as like needing to kind of try to support them in some way, and feeling like they're causing, their own morality is causing this issue, and they start to feel guilt for that. And it's not, you want to be able to distinguish and have that difference of understanding of a struggle that your boyfriend or girlfriend is going through versus the moral decisions that you've made. What I tell a lot, it's usually women, because it's usually the husbands who are struggling with it. At least this is how it's
statistically
brought up
speaking.
to me.
That's
statistically,
it does happen
it's
the
brought
other
up
way,
to me,
though.
so.
Yeah.
It does, but I will say, just in my own conversations, whenever I'm talking with the young ladies, with the wives, that conversation is like, this is not about you and what you aren't, or who you're not, or what your body is or isn't. This has nothing to do with that. And I cannot stress that enough, because that's immediately, especially for my young ladies, that's where they go to, and that comparison. And it's so frustrating, because pornography is so destructive within a relationship because of the divide that it puts between the two people in that way. And so, like, I wanted to make sure that we stress that side of things.
Yeah, I love that you're going there, because I was wanting to go there as well. I remember me and Josh were probably 3 months into dating, and one of the things that I valued so much was that Josh sat down with me and he was like, hey, just to be totally transparent, this is where I'm coming from. This is a part of my story. I'm walking in freedom now, but I need to be with someone who's at peace with the fact that that's a part of my story. I need to be with somebody who is able to forgive me that was a part of my story, and is willing to move forward with me. And while I'm so grateful, one, for, like you were saying, his honesty, his openness, I was also so grateful that not by his willpower, but by his denial of self and by his surrendering to the Spirit, he was walking in freedom from it. But even in that, I remember having very honest conversations in response to Josh saying, like, do you ever, I'm just being really honest here, but do you ever compare me to what you've seen? And I mean, we remained pure, so I'm not saying like physically, but I would just think like future tense, like, Josh, I'm scared of whenever we get married and we do have sex on our wedding night, like I have in my own insecurities felt like, oh no, are you going to see me as beautiful, or are you going to be comparing me to images that you've seen? And that was coming from a place of like, we were walking in purity, we were walking in freedom, we both love the Lord. And so I want to say that to let you know, you're not crazy for having those insecurities. You're not crazy for having those fears or those thoughts. And I would love, Josh, for you, I feel like you touched on it really beautifully, but I would love for you to encourage either the girlfriend who's having those fears, or the wife who has had her husband approach her and say, hey, I screwed up.
And actually, before even we get into that, because I think that's one thing, it's usually either the wife caught the husband, or the husband is bold enough to bring that to the wife. And I've walked alongside just a handful of people, and that's the first thing that comes out of the wife's mouth, is that this has everything to do with me. Like, I'm not pretty enough. I'm not worthy enough.
It's a comparison.
It's a comparison game. So, yes, I 100% agree. But to the husband that's listening, like, good job on your boldness to bring it up. And to the wife that's listening, you're not alone in thinking, I'm not pretty. I'm not enough. This is all about me. And when in reality, if you listen to the last podcast, it has everything to do with the selfishness of the husband and his own wants and desires, not you. But sorry, I just had to say that to the people listening. I would love to hear what you think on this, Josh.
Yeah. So, like, and I would say that is definitely part of it, but there's yet even more. There's another side to this. So it's like, for the relationships that aren't going well. Usually in that, whenever those conversations aren't happening, when the intimacy isn't strong, sex is one of the first things to go. There's, I can't even remember, I don't want to throw out useless statistics, but I did have it come across my desk last week that was roughly 30 to 35% of marriages are completely sexless.
Wow.
Which was a crazy stat. So definitely check on the validity of that. But I was just kind of like wrestling with that stat. And it was like, that's so hard whenever you really look at it, because you're missing on a huge piece of the intimacy. Now, that is the physical act of complete transparency and disclosure, right? To be disrobed in front of your partner is a disrobing of information, a disrobing of that spiritual, mental, emotional, along with the physical. It's kind of that representation of that. And so, like, whenever you see that within a husband where pornography is there, we can't not talk about those marriages where that is happening.
Very true.
And because a lot of times what'll come out and it's like, well, sometimes the husband's like, well, what am I supposed to do? This has been cut off, and I found myself in this place, and there's a huge amount of resentment there, because now the wife feels like, oh, so it's my fault. And what I always tell couples in that situation is like, yes, but it's his fault too. This is you guys. It's important for, especially within a marriage relationship, for us to be able to acknowledge, okay, where do I need to take responsibility in this?
Yeah.
And this is any argument where it blows up. I always tell people it's like, it's not because one person did it wrong. It may have started that way, but if the other person responds poorly, then we have a full-blown argument. And like at any given moment, one person could really work to redirect it in a completely different way. And so you want to really do the mirror work and identify and look at like what's going on here. And so just because the woman has pulled away and is not having sex with the husband does not in any way justify his actions in pornography at all.
Yeah.
It makes sense. Does not justify it. Those are two completely different things. Two completely
I
different
love
things.
that you said that, because that's so true.
Well, see, and the other piece is too, is like, and here's what we need to understand about pornography. Pornography changes those parts of the brain, and all of a sudden, whenever a man is continually looking at pornography, it changes how you interact with your wife, how you interact with your girlfriend, how you interact with your partner. It's like, in such a way that it's like, okay, they're pulling away because this is different. I don't know what this is.
Yeah.
And so being able to recognize, okay, it might have been the pornography that led to the lack of sex, which led to more pornography, which, there's, it gets really confusing fast, and it's very difficult. Whenever we start to point the finger, I always tell people, like, pause, put your fingers down, let's pull the mirrors out. And it's important for us to be able to really look at and identify kind of where we are at in this. And so that comparison is a difficult game, because for a lot of women, that's already a battle. It's already a battle that they're waging in their comparison to other girls online, with every filter known to man. I mean, heck, we have AI generated girls now that are that you have to compete with.
It's
Like,
crazy.
good luck. Good luck. Like, it's just, it's one of those things that is, it's not sustainable. And therefore, it's not even healthy to engage in that.
It's exhausting.
It is. It's definitely exhausting. But I mean, try to tell that to, a 15-year-old girl who is struggling with her own image already, and that's what's being thrown in her face continually. It's so awful. And this is why I always tell people, especially young guys, like, you have the opportunity to be able to allow this young daughter of God to experience a relationship where she's not being compared in that way. For once in a moment in that day, that she could actually enjoy being in a relationship with someone because of what she brings to the table, her sense of humor, her beauty, but it's hers. And the beauty of that and that experience is it's real, it's organic, it's natural, it's something that is actually right in front of us. And that's what pornography steals. That's what it takes away.
Yeah. I think I love, because I think a part of my journey dealing with pornography before Emma and I were together, I got to the point, before I knew Emma, I got to the point that I was like, man, I have to have this self-control in me. Like, that's a fruit of the Spirit, as we talked about last. That, like, that's a part of me that I have to have the self-control so that I don't sit across the table from my kids and say, you know, Dad couldn't get his stuff together, so we're splitting up. And I'm the reason behind that. And I think being able to come and submit that, and be like, you know what, I'm gonna step up. I'm gonna kind of come this. I'm gonna change my heart. I'm gonna have supportive people around me and really deal with it in my heart. I think that's the most beautiful thing, because that's where the problem is, and that's where you can fix it. It's not fixing it. I need to go, okay, well, he's watching pornography, so I need to go be prettier than those girls. Or I need to go perform like those girls do. So I need to go watch it so I know how to do it, or whatever. Like, it's completely a made-up world of pornography. Like you were just saying, the AI, all that different stuff. Like, yes, it is a completely fantasy of a world that does not exist except in your mind, which does not exist. Like, and so how can we truly come alongside and love the person in that really hard state, and for them to love and be a gracious place for a husband to come and either submit, like, be like, hey, I'm struggling with this. I'm going to be honest with you. This is something I need help in this. Being as a wife, I know that would be huge, to have that grace place of being able to fall and being like, okay, let's do this as a team, because I made a promise to you that we're not, like, at the altar, I said, for better or for worse. Now, this is a pretty worse part of the better, and I'm going to get through this with you, because I promise you that it is.
What's coming to my mind so much, because we're talking about dating relationships, we're talking about the reality of just being a girl and easily comparing. And I was also going to say, and we're talking about marriage, and in all of it, I see so heavily Ephesians 6. That our battle is not against flesh and blood, but it is against the spiritual forces of evil in the heavenly realms, that we have a real enemy who hates our guts. We have a real enemy whose native language is lies. His native language is deception. And so I'm just so encouraged in this conversation, and I hope whether you're 15 in high school, or you're in college, or you're a mom and a wife, put on the full armor of God and realize that your battle is not against the girl you're comparing yourself to. Your battle is not against your husband. Your battle is against a real enemy who doesn't want you to walk in the freedom that truth brings. And also going back to what you were saying, Josh, about marriage and how we can so easily point fingers. And while there is a reality of, like, yes, they did something wrong, in acknowledging that, we can forget to search my own heart. God, is there anything in me that you're wanting to sanctify me in? And I just thought about Adam and Eve in the garden, where God is approaching them after they've noticed they're naked and they're hiding from the Lord. And Adam's first response is, well, she took of it first. And then Eve's first response is, but the enemy, he deceived me. And there was a total lack of, like, all of those things were true, but there was a lack of ownership. So I'm really grateful you brought that up, because I don't think that's a new tactic we humans have, pointing blame.
Definitely not. Well, and to speak into that a little bit, the importance of the understanding of ownership, of what you're taking ownership for. The reason why I encourage Emma, the women, the girls, to be able to look within themselves and identify, like, do that mirror work, is not because there's something that they did in causing their husbands or their partners or their boyfriends or whatever to struggle in that way. It's because whenever you engage in that and you're looking within and you're looking at really working to strengthen your own life, strengthen your own heart, and being able to strengthen your own relationship with the Lord, guess what happens by proxy? You're encouraging the person that you're with, and you're creating an environment in which is inviting them to do so. And so I'm not saying you need to do this because there's something you did that was wrong. This is what we had talked about from the very get-go. We talked about first order and second order. And Josh, you had mentioned how it's very, very important that the girlfriend or wife or whomever does not take on that role of accountability. Right. And we talked about how the role of accountability is very much a first order solution. Right. It's important, but that first order solution needs to be some part of our community. For me, it was my buds, my friends that I was in high school with, my crew, that was going to keep me accountable. We weren't afraid to ask each other anything, and it was huge that I had that. But they were in charge of the first order. The second order is something that happens within that significant relationship. It's like, as I'm growing in my relationship with the Lord, I'm encouraging my wife to grow in her relationship with the Lord. As I see her continue to work towards and growing in her relationship with the Lord, guess what happens? Same with me. And so the beauty of that speaks to the second order, to the heart change that is so important if you're going to work to overcome and defeat pornography. And so while I tell the girlfriend or the wives that this is not something that you take an active role in as far as the accountability, that doesn't mean that you're without power in this. And the beauty of it is that it's not by you trying to change him. It's actually just you looking within yourself and growing stronger than you even are. Now, and it's growing in your own relationship with the Lord. Like, what that does is invite that into that relationship. And so that's key. That's an important aspect of that.
Wow. I think as an encouragement to people who, especially this would definitely just be the married couple who struggling with someone struggling with pornography. Don't be afraid to go and have counseling. Have a marriage counseling. We literally have a marriage family counselor on here. And so that's perfect, because I think having the conversation just YouTube is healthy. But to have that person in there to ask right questions and to see, okay, wait, you're interrupting here, or you're trying to kind of poke and it's going off trail, you're going down rabbit holes. To have someone to really work that out between the two of you is not rock bottom. It's not the end of the road. It's counseling or divorce. It's not that. Like, counseling is a beautiful thing. Emma and I have talked about it.
I love counseling.
Seriously. Like, we want to do counseling at least once a year for the rest of our marriage, because it's a great just a checkup. It's a great, let's talk through things with a kind of a person between us, a mediator almost, that's like, hey, let's talk through these things. Let's get the right questions being asked, because maybe there's some root stuff and deep down inside me that I'm actually not saying, that I'm afraid to say. And I don't even know that I'm afraid to say it, but I'm afraid to say it. So definitely, I think that's just in this whole conversation, just one thing. Don't be afraid of counseling. It's a friend. It's not a foe.
Well, because there's so much to consider, especially when you're looking at pornography. It's like to consider, what is pornography doing? Like, what's its role here? How am I going to confront this if I don't even know what this is? It could be a coping mechanism. It could be a pornography addiction. It could be a full-blown sex addiction that's playing out in pornography. All of those are possibilities, but like, whenever you're so close to a situation, the idea that you're going to figure that out is difficult to even consider. You know, and so it's very important that you have someone to help play that out. The other thing I love about counseling is whenever I have two people in the room and they're letting me know what's going on, and I'll ask a question, and the other one just kind of looks at the other one and is like, I knew it. Like, this is what I've been saying the whole time. And it was just, it validates their question. And the other person's like, and they receive it in a different way because here's a professional that's asking the exact same question. Maybe my husband has a valid reason to ask that question, or maybe my wife has a valid reason to ask that question, you know? And so being able to have that third person, and we've all done, like we were talking about it a little bit before, you know, I've told my son something over and over and over and over again, and then he goes and hears it from, you know, the youth director, and it says like, oh, you'll never believe what the youth director said, you know, blah, 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 blah. I'm like, you know what?
I'm telling you that for years.
I'm glad you got it. Right? And it's being able to have that other person, that mentor that in your life, that friend in your life, that counselor in your life, that pastor in your life that's going to be able to speak into your life in such a way because they're seeing it from that outside the system. So to speak, is what we call it, to be able to really kind of point to that and ask the questions that need to be asked that sometimes we're too close to be able to see.
Absolutely. And I think just to add in we've partnered up with Faithful Counseling for 2-3 years now. Since we started the podcast, since COVID, we wanted Faithful Counseling to be a part of this podcast. So we have always had a link on the bottom of our podcast in our bio for people. And it's an online counseling program, Christian counseling program that anybody can use. And so I will be honest with you, we get a kickback, we get a little paid from if you use our link. You don't have to use our link. You can go and get Faithful Counseling online. I think you get like the first month free or something like that, but that's neither here nor there. We do that because counseling is so beautiful, and we want y'all to have an availability of coming and finding help, even if you're in a place that you're like, I've been burned by the church, or I've been like my youth pastor, or whatever this, like, or I don't have a family, or I just moved to college and I know nobody. Like, I'm not about to go and tell so-and-so stranger about this. Like, this is actually a place that can travel with you, that can go with you, and it's a great organization that is Christ-centered. So just want to put that in there as we kind of wrap up this conversation.
Yeah, and I think too, as we close, I'm so grateful because something that I feel like was just threaded throughout this entire conversation, part 1 and part 2, and I hope you as a listener are hearing it, is that there is hope. And I really think the enemy works in cyclical ways where he would love for you to believe that because you've given into the temptation, there's no hope for you to ever get out of it. So why even try to stop? And I want to tell you, I beg to differ in the name of Jesus Christ, because he is a God of redemption. He is a God who makes all things new. He is a God of turning what seems impossible and makes it possible. He is a God of hope. He is a God who says anyone who comes to him, the old is passed away and the new is here. That's who our God is. And so if that is something you've been believing, that there's no hope, then you haven't been listening to the God of truth. You've been listening to the father of lies. And so I also pray you take that away from this conversation, that like, you don't go away from here saying, yeah, that was really great, but that's not for me because you don't know my story, how cyclical it's been. Actually, this is exactly for you, because God does incredible work no matter who you are. Join the club. My story may not be of pornography, but God has brought me out of cyclical patterns of shame and guilt and fear. It may look different, but it's the same God who brought me freedom, and he's the same God who can bring you freedom too. So we love you, and I hope you take that away.
Something else I would like to add.
Last
to,
piece of advice
just
right
as
here.
Some resources that are out there for the wives who have husbands that are addicted to pornography. There is a helpful book, and it has a workbook that you can actually go through. It's called "When Your Husband is Addicted to Pornography: Healing Your Wounded Heart." Vicky Tide, I believe is how you say her last name. Tiede is the author. You can find it on Amazon. Our counseling center, Tasso Counseling here in Stanton, Virginia, we did a group with this book, and had wives in a group that did like a 6-week series.
Wow.
And really delving into this. And I definitely suggest that, for any wives out there that know of other wives, maybe take this material and really work through it. There's a lot of other material out there that's useful. The Conquer series. Man, for you guys that are struggling in that, the Conquer series is absolutely incredible and just a great source of information. I've been using their stuff for a while. Some of the stuff that I used before I even knew who they were was their stuff, and I didn't know it. And we have a pastor that leads a group at the church here that I go to with the Conquer series, and they lead a group of men all the time. And so there are some resources out there right now that are just really, really good, really helpful. Those are two that I can offer that I would highly suggest you guys checking out if it applies. So
I love that. That's good stuff.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, guys.
I love this conversation so much. And to you who are listening, I hope you know how much you are loved, you are on purpose, and you have such significance. I hope you know that. I hope that you have an incredible rest of your week. And again, if you have only listened to part 2 of this conversation, you should totally go back and listen to part 1 because they go together in such a really cool way. But I love y'all, and I cannot wait to talk to y'all next week. Bye, guys.